All right. I have gone through and I've fiddled with due dates a little bit. I Nobody's gotten any dings on their points or anything like that for being late at all, because everybody's been really good about communicating with me and letting me know what's going on. And honestly, I think that what's really difficult about this class is the first week in this class and the first 2 weeks in a semester, we've got a lot of background that we've got to just pile in. And trying to do that is just, it's really unfair to everybody, but it just has to be done, I think, so that we can develop the vocabulary to communicate for the rest of the course. Now, let's see. Oh, is Jacob with us today? He's not? Okay, did you guys see Jacob's videos that he posted on the discussion for the tools of artistic critique?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what he did is pretty much what we're looking for. I think the easiest way to do this is to print out the sheet that says the tools of artistic critique, have those questions in front of you, and just look at the object and just go through those questions. And I think he just did a voiceover with images on screen. That's right, isn't it? You just had the images on screen?
Yeah, that's what he did.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to do it.
Sure. I know on the first one, he actually like recorded himself with his piece. But on the second one, when he was critiquing somebody else's, he just went to the discussion.
Okay. And I think that you could do the same thing, or if you didn't want to be on screen at all, you could just do you could show your image, an image of your piece from the discussion, and that's absolutely fine too, or whatever. And I've had people lose points for not doing this at all because they said, well, just my video wasn't working. There's a lot of different ways to do this, and I've had students who have done every single way. One way is to set up your phone to just record you with an image, take a photo of the thing that you're doing. Another way is to take a video of your computer with voice and just have the image up on the computer screen while you're talking about it. And another way of doing it is to actually call somebody and record yourself talking, which can be a little bit problematic with the phone. But one of the creative ways that somebody did, nothing was working for them. And what he actually ended up doing was setting up a Teams call. And he just recorded himself talking space to an empty virtual room. And those actually turned out really well. So there's lots of different options for recording yourself. And what I wanted to do today, I'll just tell you a little bit about what I'd like to do is first, I want to talk about if you guys have any questions so far. Then I want to talk a little bit more about the tools, applying the tools of artistic critique. And I'd like to get a couple of volunteers to do that. Then I wanted to talk about being diversity collaborators and just look at the excellent examples that people have been posting on the class discussion. I want to revisit Papier Mache and talk a little bit about texture and light. And we may have to talk more about that next week, but I wanted to go over the texture and light quiz as well. What I'm seeing is for the quizzes, the only questions that people are missing are questions that it looks like to me they didn't read all the way through, or they may have hit the wrong button. And I think that in those cases, several people where that has happened just turned right around and put comments in the comment box, and then emailed me and let me know they had done that. And it worked out really well. And they got all their points. I don't have a problem with giving more points to people. So do you guys have any questions of the things that we've done so far in the course?
I just had a quick question. Is all that we're seeing on the modules, is that everything we're doing for the semester, or are we getting any new assignments that you're posting?
I don't, let's see. Okay, I will be posting one more thing. Right now we have due dates for everything up until the last week of school. And the final module that I will be posting has to do with, you're going to revisit the sculptures you've been making. Everybody's carved their foam and they're covering it with paper mache. Then you're going to be looking at texture and light, and you're going to be examining contemporary processes. And then after those, I will be releasing a module. I think I'll probably just do it this next week, but that last module is applying what you've learned about texture and light and contemporary processes to your sculpture. So you have access to your sculpture, and you paint it, add texture to it, do a bunch of stuff to it, and that's what you'll work on for the last week of the semester. That's a really good question. But so that's, everything else has been published. That's the last module. And one of the reasons why I kind of held off on publishing that is semesters where I've published that, some people have done it and turned it in before having anything to do with the texture and light module or the contemporary processes module, which are both prerequisites for that one. And I don't really want to make it so you can't open it without doing those others first. I want you to open it and look at it and think about it in the back of your mind, but I don't want anybody to turn that in until after they've done Module 5 and Module 6. So thank you. That's an excellent question. Any other questions that people have?
I don't think I have any right now.
Okay. How about you, Tanner?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Now, the tools of artistic critique, I wanted to bring that up a bit. And you're going to see a scowl on my face for a little bit as I try to manipulate this, because I thought I had it all ready to go and I screwed up. So give me just a second here. Okay, I'm going to try to use the magic of technology. Okay, can everybody see this page? Tools of artistic critique?
Yeah. Yes.
As you guys get closer, and I'm really hoping that the three of you will be able to do those two critiques, just like Jacob did. And I'd like you guys to be able, if you can do that this week, that'd be awesome, because then it would be out of the way and people would see more examples of how to do it right. So I really appreciate that when everybody, if you guys are able to do that. Going over this, I thought it would be a really good idea. We've been talking about description, analysis, interpretation, and evaluation, but I wanted to go over some of the questions to consider. And so if everybody can pull up this page on their computer, it's in the first module, and you'll see it's the page that's titled Tools of Artistic Critique. And I am going to pull up something else, if I can. I'm sorry, give me just a second here, please. It seems like, I don't know if anybody else in the history of the world has ever had the issue where it seems like the only time that computers don't work right is when you're giving a presentation. You guys have never had that happen, have you?
Oh no, for sure, yes.
All right. Okay, I'm going to do a screen share and show an image, and then I'm going to go over and use the tools of artistic critique to kind of talk about this image. So here we go. All right, can everybody see this image?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, can you describe it to me? We're looking for, I would like each of you to try answering a different one of these questions. One is, what is the content? Is it realistic, abstract, or non-objective? What are the predominant colors and textures and shapes? What is the first thing you notice? And what is the overall effect or mood? And you guys can address, one of you can, each of you can pick one of those questions and address it. And just start talking, when you want to observe something. What are the predominant colors?
I would say it's a pretty pastel group of colors. I see predominantly like there's white, and then the background is like a cream. And then there's kind of like an aqua blue and a light turquoise, and then like a brighter goldenrod yellow that doesn't really stand out versus the others, but maybe is a little less of a muted color. And then the bright pink door also stands out.
Right, excellent. Very good. I'd like somebody else to comment on the style and the shape and perhaps the size of this. That was excellent, by the way. Who would like to address a description of it where we talk about, is it abstract or realistic? What is the size of it? And what are the principal shapes?
I'd say it's very, I think the string helps sell the scale, because there can be like wool blankets or like carpet, kind of like that background like slope that vary in
Right.
size, but I think it's the string that really sells the size of the house.
How big do you think it is?
I'd say like maybe 3 inches.
Okay. Do you think it's abstract or realistic or non-objective?
Ooh, I kind of want to say abstract, because it's like if you were to actually see that, like it's like a real house, you'd like tell what it is, but you'd be like, that's not how a house should look.
Yeah, that'd be kind of disturbing if you saw it life size, wouldn't it? All right, good. And what are the some of the shapes?
Like a lot of just like squares, triangles, like it's like the squares make up like the tiles of the roof too. Can't really describe like the shape of like the string. It's just kind of there. But like the negative space, it's kind of like a rectangle, kind of like a walkway up to the door.
Yeah. Yeah, those are all really, really good things. Excellent. good observations. Now, the third person, who could you talk a little bit about the textures, the different kind of textures that you see?
I think she put in the chat that she has some background noise, so she can't.
Oh, okay. Um, can you type in the chat? I think some of the textures that I see, what's that? Like that, it feels to me kind of like that, either a shaggy carpet or a well-loved sheepskin blanket kind of thing for the ground. I see that it's a rather standard yarn shape, but the looping of the yarn gives a really interesting effect for the portions that we can read as grass or yard. I like how it's, like you said, it's rectangles of paper on the roof, but the artist cut them with scissors and kind of flared them out a little bit. So we get a very distinctively different texture than anywhere else on the piece, but it still feels like it belongs as part of the house. It's not it's a different texture, it's distinct, but it's not completely foreign. Now, that's a really super simple little thing that didn't take very long, but do you notice a difference when you're able to start articulating some of the things that you observe when you look at artwork?
I feel like I usually appreciate it more. I know that like when I run into a piece that really doesn't speak to me, like in a museum or something, it does help to do critique. It doesn't mean that like I'll love it afterwards, but I usually do come away with like more understanding about the piece and more respect for it too.
Yeah, and I think that that is a major key. Just appreciation, respect for the work that went into it. My mom, my brothers and I did just a really impressive amount of stupid things growing up. And my mom was really good about not hurting our feelings as kids. When we would do something that would just look like crap, she would have us, and she would say, well, tell me about it. Or she would say things like, I can see that you put a lot of energy into this. And those are things that we can say to kind of mitigate the potential hurt that we might give to somebody. But what is really good about that is, just like Kylie was saying, I think it does help us to get more involved in the communication aspect of art when we can at least feel some of the energy and appreciation for somebody else's craftsmanship or work that they've done. When the next step is analysis, and some of the questions we ask there are, how are the choices of materials affecting the piece, and how is the overall mood achieved? Since we've described it already, I would say that the material choice, how the artist decided to put this thing together. Well, the house is relatively simple, but the colors that they chose give it a very specific mood. If the person did something that was not pastels, if they used like really glaring reds, really strong whites and blacks, it would feel completely different. Or if they used, say, grays and more earth tones, it would feel very different. If they chose to do that yard area with indoor-outdoor carpeting rather than yarn, it would feel different. And these are kinds of things that we can either address what we see, or if that doesn't give us a lot of information, we can start comparing what we see with alternatives and see where that gets us. Because discussing the potential material choices, how the artist put this together, examining the kind of choices that we think as artists that artist went through in order to create whatever it is that they create, I think helps us to really connect a little bit more effectively with the potential meaning behind the artwork, and gain more appreciation and understanding for it. So the biggest difference between description and analysis is that description is we are just engaging with how the artwork impacts the shared world, the perceptible world. And with analysis, we start asking ourselves questions, trying to put ourselves in the mind of the artist to understand what they were doing. We aren't necessarily worrying too much in analysis about the artist's worldview, but there are some things that we can engage in where we wonder, well, why did they choose this material over another one? What does this particular material choice mean? Is it more sturdy? Is it less sturdy than other things? Do you guys know who Klaus Olas is? He's the guy that made the plastic toilet that was like a big balloon. Do you know who I'm talking about?
No.
I'm sorry, it's Klaus Oleg. It was an inflatable toilet, and I think it was during the 60s, but he was doing that to kind of really show that materials choice has a lot to do with how we interact with artwork. And we can really see that if somebody's making a public work out of wood, it's going to feel different and be more appropriate in some areas than if they made a public work out of steel. Now, if you're doing public work in a playground, how you're going to be designing it, how you're going to be building it, what materials you use is going to be different than if it was a public work, for example, in the middle of a courthouse where nobody's going to be climbing on it. And when we shift to interpretation, the next step, we're inserting even more of ourselves into the process of trying to understand what the artist is doing. In this, we can make some intelligent guesses, I think, about why the artist may have chosen to use this material over that. What kind of colors are they using? Because even though choices of materials and colors for the symbols that they represent are going to vary from culture to culture, generally it's a pretty good bet that whatever or wherever the artist is displaying their stuff, if they don't have extraneous explanations about why they chose to do things, then there should be at least some points of contact that we can understand as we examine it. And through close examination, we can look at that house, for example, and the lines are very clean cut. It's very simple. It's abstracted to the point of where it looks almost like a Lego type toy, but there's nothing really sharp or edgy about it. There's nothing in the coloring that would suggest that there's anything dangerous or off-putting about it. It feels that house structure is comforting and welcoming. And that, I think, gives us some clues about potentially the worldview of the potential artist or of the artist that made it. And that helps us to deal or to address these ideas of interpretation. Is the artwork accessible? Are there obvious symbols that we can see? Is it formal? Is it conceptual? Does the piece depend on you knowing certain historical references or social structures? Is it responding or reacting to those kinds of things? What do you think the artist is saying? And then, of course, what do you think their worldview is? I think these are really good questions as we start to engage with the artwork and kind of establish that communication we talked about a couple weeks ago. And then finally, this one I think can potentially be problematic, but it really shouldn't. The judgment or evaluation. I see the biggest problems with this are when we are looking at our own work and kind of judging our own work. Because out of everybody in the world, who's your worst critic?
You are.
Yeah. And one of the reasons is that I think that we assume everybody else can see in full display the weaknesses that we feel we have, or the mistakes that we had made as we were producing something. And the reality is, when people look at your work, even if it's somebody who's living with you, when they look at your work, what they see is what you've what you have done making. It's not, they don't know anything about the thought processes and the second guessing and the mistakes that you made or any of the other things. All they see is the final piece. And so particularly when you do a critique of your own work, pretend that you've never seen it before. And this is absolutely vital when you go through this process on your own work, even if it's not for an assignment or anything like that. When you are done with a piece and you want to reevaluate it so that you can edit it and perhaps improve it, you need to look at it as if it's the first time you've ever seen it. And a big reason for that is the vast majority of time when you do that, you go through this rigorous process of artistic critique, you will realize that you are a much better artist than you at that moment of self-doubt thought that you were. And I've seen people in the class critiquing their own work when they've chosen to do that, pretend that it's the first time they've ever seen it. And there's been several students that have said, wow, this is really well done. And it is, but like we said, we're our own worst critics, and we don't always see or give ourselves credit for the good things that we do. And sometimes the evaluation, we have a tendency to devalue our work when it feels like maybe it's a step to something else, or it's a step in the process and not a finished work. But I think it's also important to remember that it's a vital step of the process, without which you wouldn't be able to get to that better space you're aiming for. At the bottom of this page, you'll also see that there's two lists of words, one under elements of design and one under principles of design. And as you go through that, I want you to try very hard to incorporate as many of those words as you can. That makes sense, of course. We don't want to just pull them out of our ear as we're talking, but use as many of those words to describe things. Oh, great. I cannot find, am I still, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
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 Okay, because I cannot find how to get back onto the Teams thing. Okay, there we are. Oh, sigh. Yeah, evidently to teach, you don't have to be reasonably intelligent with technology. Okay, but does that help as we talk about those things? Does that help with that kind of a discussion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. If even if two of you are able to do those two critiques, and one thing that Jacob did that was absolutely perfect is his time limit. I have actually been in a class where somebody went on for over half an hour, and that is completely unacceptable. Jacob did an absolutely perfect job. I mean, I couldn't have asked for anything better. You need to keep it 3 to 5 minutes. If you go over about 7 minutes, you will fail completely. Maybe not completely, but you will fail pretty seriously. Okay, I'm gonna show some of the class discussion, and this is important. It's going to have names of people that participated. But what I want to talk about next is that diversity collaborator thing, and just touch on it a little bit. Let's see if I can use the magic of technology again. Okay, here we go. Can everybody see this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. Everybody that put up things, I really appreciate what you guys have done, because they are absolutely amazing illustrations of exactly the kind of thing that we're talking about. Was anybody startled with how much impact art can have, for positive or negative?
I know that just like in researching too, I posted and then I haven't looked at this again, so I can see that there's a lot more people who have added stuff. But I remember just being like, yeah, feeling sad about how just like mean we can be about just silly things.
Yeah, and it's astounding to me. One thing I think we do have to be careful about is realizing that these things are products of their time. But even then, like the negative stuff as a product of its time was really bad. I think some of it was just awful. One of the books I grew up with was one called it was a group of stories from India, and it was called one of the editions I had was called Little Black Sambo, and it was a description of this kid who was just incredibly brilliant, and he was one of my heroes growing up, and I had no idea that the presentation of this book, it was printed in the early 50s, before I believe the independence of India from the British Empire. And it was about a little Hindu boy who was able to resolve all these issues and problems without resorting to violence. He would outthink people, he would trick them, and he was just an awesome character. He was kind of like I don't know if you've ever heard of Anansi, who was a trickster in Central African folklore, or Coyote, who's a trickster in Southwest indigenous folklore, or Brer Rabbit is another. He was a trickster in the Southeast. But these were all heroes of mine growing up that were able to outwit the bad guys without using violence, but using their brains. And now looking back at the illustrations for those things, I realize, holy cow, these, they're woefully characterized and incredibly racist depictions. Is a product of the time. The stories themselves were really positive, but the artwork was designed to, I think, well, it seems like to me, lull parents into thinking, oh, this is harmless, and we'll let the kids read it. But when the kids read it, it's giving a very different message than the depictions, or that the illustrations might be assumed to represent. And I just thought that was really, really interesting. So, Sambo was a hero of mine. If you ever find any stories like that, a lot of universities probably aren't going to have those books, because the illustrations are incredibly racist, very nastily done from our perspective today. But if you are able to find those stories about little Sambo, I think you kind of see how 40, 50 years ago I could enjoy those. And I didn't realize, at the time, what I saw was a kid that did not look like me, and he was super smart, and he was the kind of kid that I wanted to be. I wanted to be just like him growing up. And it's just fascinating to me, though, like what Kylie was saying, how nasty some of this imagery can be. And I really like the Barbie doll with this Muslim fencer. That I think is amazing. We go through and there's the perfect Nazi. You know, I don't know if you're aware the Nazis began as a conservative Christian retrenchment society, and then was taken over by people that turned it into something that was even much nastier than what it had started. But I think that's it just is horrible. And then we look at this with the Epcot Center painting. I love that kind of hopeful image, and it feels to me like it is just a really cool, grand presentation, as opposed to being something that is designed to be specifically politically propagandistic. We look at this with a nasty political cartoon, and then on the left, again, we see something that is just really hopeful and beautiful, rather than, maybe I'm reading into it, but it doesn't feel to me like it has any of the same propaganda markers that things like the Nazi poster did. You know, this doesn't feel like propaganda. It feels like it's a bit more honest than that. This is definitely propaganda, the black and white. And, you know, these are really good examples of World War II. Have any of you seen a World War II era comic books done in the US?
I haven't.
Have you guys ever seen the Marvel movie Captain America, the First Avenger?
Yeah.
When Steve Rogers is doing the circuit getting people to buy war bonds, there are these several scenes where he is beating up a caricature of Hitler. And, you know, that's like right out of the comic books at the time. You get depictions just like on the left-hand side of this image here of, you know, these terrible people that we're supposed to hate. And the depictions are so characterized that they've lost a lot of the indicators that show that they're real people. And which I think is fascinating. And then you get this thing in poster in French about how Jewish people are at the you know, are responsible for all these terrible things that happen. Just stuff like that we think today are ridiculous, but if we look at social media, we see a lot of that kind of thing happening now, but it's just people try to be a lot more subtle about it. I think this is kind of a fun poster. It's looks like it's right out of it's right out of like a park type parking lot. I think that's kind of cool. And I thought this was an excellent example where you compare the minstrel show or black-faced makeup to Michael Jackson's groundbreaking black or white video. Have any of you guys seen that video on YouTube, the Michael Jackson video?
I actually don't know that I have. I should definitely watch that.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend, because one of the things at the time that he was producing that, the federal government was funding a lot of research into what became their digital identification device that they use at airports now. And when they film people coming off of planes, they can tell who they are. And the technology used in the video morphs the people into one another. And it really gives a lot of truth to that idea that we were talking about earlier, that the concept, the dehumanizing concept of racism is based on pretty much a fictional understanding of how people work. You know, the difference in skin tone and facial features is such an incredibly minor separation from person to person that there's really no scientific justification to say that any one group is superior to another using just those exterior markers. So I just think, and I thought that video was a really nice artistic way of exploring that. And we get another image of minstrel show, and then a cartoon that shows a lot of very diverse people getting together. Of course, it's all about the miracle cure of yogurt, which is awesome. And then these, we have the caricature of the mascot, and then this poster. This poster makes me think a lot of Barbara Kruger, who Barbara Kruger was somebody who worked in the fashion magazine arena, and she was really good at communicating a lot with graphic illustration and graphic design. And then she started realizing that the kind of simplistic presentation of a pseudo ideal was very harmful. And Barbara Kruger started using her skills to really make impactful works that are principally with spoken word and simple images, which I think is really cool. And I think that I like that because it flies directly at odds with this mascot image. And there are a couple of shops online that you can go to. You know, there's the old Washington Redskins T-shirt that has the logo of that, and you can also get now T-shirts done in the same style of art that say Caucasians. So, which I think is great, because if you're going to have the one, you've got to have the other. And I like these two images as well, are really addressing some of those strong ideas. With this one, Mickey Mouse and a Boy Thursday, you know, the first animated feature cartoon that featured Mickey Mouse was Steamboat Willie. And the characterization of Mickey Mouse, he was designed, everybody says he was an anthropomorphized mouse, but the inspiration for his character was, again, a product of his time, and not a very pleasant product of his time. And so there's a lot of things that Disney does now that are very, very different from what they did 50, 60 years ago. And then we get this beautiful image from the Harlem Renaissance that I think is wonderful. Have all of you been able to, and this was a really good example too. Do you remember this story about the Taliban destroying the Buddha? Are you guys old enough? You guys aren't old enough to remember this, but do you remember any stories about this?
I don't actually.
Okay, in the late 90s, a lot of international aid, a lot of countries stopped giving international aid to Afghanistan because the Taliban were basically pirating all the UN caravans into Afghanistan and stealing all the stuff that was intended for everybody. And so they would send medicine and food in, and it would disappear, going to the Taliban leaders, and it would never get to the people that it was intended for. So the Taliban got onto international media and said, hey, we really need this. And if you don't give it to us, we're going to destroy this UNESCO site of, you know, this centuries old Buddha statue that was carved into living rock in these areas in Afghanistan. And there's several of these sculptures. Well, the international community knew that it was a ploy on the behalf of, on the part of the Afghanistan, the Taliban, just to get more wealth, essentially. And it wasn't really because they cared for their own people. And but they didn't want this to be destroyed. And so people did start donating food and medical supplies to Afghanistan again. Sure enough, the Taliban stole it again. And then they said, you know, the Buddha statue is an affront to God and the Prophet Muhammad because we don't believe in idols, and they blew it up anyway. Ironically, they used Stinger missiles that the CIA had given them when they were using the Taliban to fight Russian incursions or Soviet incursions. That's kind of interesting. But what is really upsetting about that to me as a student of Islam is that has nothing to do with the religion. It was just something that the Taliban wanted to do. And they wanted to do it to drive a wedge between Muslims around the world and everybody else. And with the hopes being that more people would come to support the Taliban when they realized that the rest of the world didn't support Muslims. What was interesting to me is when people remember this, it has it has very much the opposite effect now. In retrospect, there's a lot of these countries that are primarily Muslim, where I knew a guy who was a teacher in Oman, which is a very Muslim country, and he said he had more freedom of religion to express a Christmas-themed show and artwork in the English language school he was teaching in Oman than he did in the Midwest, where he had moved there from, because he was supported in what he was doing. So I just thought that was really fascinating. So it's a good example of one item that is used for both unity and divisiveness. So if you guys still have other things to do, I recommend, or if you haven't already put something into this, go ahead and think about it, and then put your 2 cents into this discussion as well. I think everybody's been really thoughtful, and it's been a really positive thing. What do you guys think? I mean, I know Kylie, you did it. Tanner, and have you been able to put anything into that discussion?
Yeah, I did the one with like I think there's like 18 faces that were kind of like interweaved on there.
Oh yeah, that's the cool one. Yeah, okay, yeah, excellent, very good. As people write about it, it's fascinating too, because it also forces us to just examine where we stand in this whole process. And Utah is predominantly Caucasian. What is fascinating to me is we have a lot in this state. We have an awful lot of people coming from as immigrants or refugees from non-Caucasian areas or non-Caucasian physical groups. And what is further interesting to me is that the U.S. State Department has said that Utah brings refugees and new immigrants into full participatory status. That means that they are active participants in society, basically productive taxpayers, at a rate that is 2 to 4 times the national average. And a big part of that is because a lot of us are aware of these kinds of ideas, and we do decide to be collaborators for the success of others. So I think that's kind of cool, and I really appreciate what you guys wrote. The next couple things I wanted to talk about is the paper mache, texture and light, and the texture and light quiz. You will notice that I went through and changed due dates a bit. I wanted to spread it out a little bit. And what you'll also notice, though, too, is that some things are overlapping. So just do your best and keep me in the loop. And nobody who's communicated to me what's going on has gotten any sort of down marks for being a little bit late or anything like that. I'm really impressed with how everybody's been working on that. Let's see, I wanted to, if I can find this. Oh, sigh. Okay, I can't find it. I wanted to share the the screen about it. But have you guys had an opportunity to look at the paper mache module and to fiddle with it a bit? I know that the to-do dates are maybe already passed, but I think that if we want to get several different layers on, then we've got to let it dry in between. Oh no, the due dates aren't passed. The introduction, that was a couple days ago, but these other things, the paper mache, we want it done in about 4 or 5 days. That sounds good. And it's going to overlap the texture and light thing a bit. With the paper mache, there are a couple things that I wanted you to look at. If you get to the introduction, you can see examples of work that was done where paper mache was being applied to the foam sculpture. And there's also a website that from a guy named Dan Reeder who does something called Gourmet Paper Mache. Have any of you had a chance to look that up?
Is he the one who did like the dragons?
Yeah, exactly. What I really like about that is when we think of paper mache, we usually think of something very sloppy. And if you make this paper mache with the materials that you have, and you can, I don't know if that's going to be enough to do 2 or 3 coats on your thing, but if you can get it to be smooth and clean looking when you're all done, use smaller strips for tighter areas and just smush the glue in and to smooth it out. It is amazing how strong it finishes off the sculpture. And looking at Dan Reeder's work, you can see that he's doing an awful lot more than a lot of people think that paper mache, it's even possible to do with paper mache. When I think of that, I think of 1940s, 1950s, there was a really horrible product that was basically a pulp paper mache, and that's what a lot of kids had Halloween masks and party favors out of, because it was incredibly cheap to produce. If you find any of that today in any antique stores, sometimes it can be pretty expensive because it's so poorly made that people had to really take care of it for it to have lasted 70 years. And you can see some of that even older than those things too. But it was a cheap material, so it was really cheaply made. And then you look at stuff like Dan Reeder does, and you realize, wow, this is a material that is actually useful. What makes the paper mache that we're doing a little bit better, I think, than regular stuff is the glue that we're using is a wood glue, which if you clean it up when it's wet, it's great. But if you let it dry, it is so much stronger than regular school glue. It is. So there's a couple of things I want you guys to be aware of as you go into paper mache. I would recommend very strongly that you get a horrible shirt from like DI or another thrift store like that, oversized shirt, and use that to protect your clothes. And I would say take a garbage bag, cut it along the 2 long seams of garbage bags so you can spread it out like a tarp and work on that. You don't even have to cut it. You can just set it down, flatten out the garbage bag, put it down, work on it. Then when you're all done, just turn the garbage bag inside out, and then all your junk stuck to the garbage bag is on the inside. You can throw it away easily. But don't try really hard not to do this over carpet. Try really hard not to drip on your clothes. Try really, really hard not to get this in the hairs of your arms, because it sucks to clean out when it dries. I would recommend if you can get like my favorite gloves are the elbow length calving gloves. You can get those pretty cheap off of Amazon. They're great because you can put them on. They cover your arms up to past your elbows, and you can even wrap above your elbows with a loop of masking tape or something like that, and your hands and arms are protected. Have any of you guys started doing the paper mache at all?
I've started.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I think the easiest way to deal with a mess is do it outside or at somebody's house where they don't care. But failing that, just be really careful that you don't get it on anything that you want to save. And is it going well for you, or are you having any problems?
It's gone pretty well. I have a first coat and then sanded it, and then I've done a second coat that I haven't sanded yet. But
All right, excellent. Would you mind terribly taking a couple pictures before you apply the second coat?
I did already apply the second coat. I
Oh,
just
you
haven't
did.
sanded
Okay.
it.
Oh, all right. All right. Well, it looks like okay. Elizabeth, what is your question?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I read on the assignment that we can use paper towel too. Is that correct?
Yes, there are several different things. Kylie, which material did you use?
I ended up using the newspaper that was in there.
Okay, all right. Because the newspaper I think is pretty good. That's what the example would. That's what was used for the example. And if you guys are on campus, usually at the end of the week, after the offices close, there is going to be extra newspapers in the little stands that are around for the free university newspaper that they have, and you can use those. But I really like the little bit higher quality paper towels, and then I tear them lengthwise, or I tear them at right angles to where the line of the perforations in between the towels, because it seems like that is really good in order to get long strips. That works really well. You need to use the little bit higher quality paper towels because low quality ones are not going to be able to, they'll fall apart once you start getting them wet. The higher quality ones, like the ones you get at Costco and stuff, they will hold up. But that is really good at holding the glue in place. And it is, if you use that, it is important that you remember to smooth it out with your fingers and sand it a bit. I have also seen people use like cotton, like old sheets, and what I've been told about that is if you're going to use fabric, just let it soak in, put a lot of the strips in the glue mixture and let it soak a little bit longer. And then that will be good. That is a little bit harder to sand. Things like magazines or anything that's glossy do not work very well at all. So I wouldn't even deal with that. So the short answer, Elizabeth, is yes.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. All right, the next thing I wanted to talk about a little bit is the texture and light module. This is really important moving forward because this is at the very end of the term, you're going to have to revisit your sculpture that you're in the process of paper macheing now, and you're going to revisit it with an eye to applying texture and light. This module, I want you to read it pretty soon. You will have a week to complete it. There are several different exercises. Can you guys all see this? It should say Introduction, Texture, and Light.
Yep.
Okay, good.
Yep.
The exercises we're basically making using the cardboard box that that your kit came in. We're basically going to be making several tiles that we're applying texture to. And with this one, the more tiles you make, the better. And I also talk about taking a census walk. You can make these tiles with cardboard. It's one thing that I talk about, but you can also find textures as you walk outside or as you walk through your own home. You guys can see this with the quiz. I'm going to do a preview so that we can talk about the quiz really quickly. Right here, it says list 12 words, adjectives that you can use to describe texture. I would like each of you to say 4, and I will start, and we'll each name one and we'll go around. Okay. And just to show you how easy this is, the first couple are really hard or difficult to come up with. You're not going to be using hard, soft, bumpy, smooth, sharp, and furry. So I will start by saying something. Let's see, for B, I'm going to say bubbly. Brisk isn't really a texture necessarily, but anything that makes you think of something cold would be good. Let's see. We go to another letter, like D, drippy. I don't know if you ever have applied spray paint, so much of it that it starts sliding down and dripping off the thing that you're painting, but you have that really interesting drippy texture. Dank is a really good one, and that's kind of when something is a little bit wet, but it makes you feel like it's rotting or going nasty. Dark references more like an atmosphere or a color, but if we do a texture that is a little bit rough and has and we use like grays or black to color it, then I think that would apply as a dark texture. And then what other textures can you think of? And I would just like you guys to each name one at a time, and then we'll go over again so that each person can name another one.
I feel like would crunchy count? I feel like it's more like a sound.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Crunchy is definitely a texture. Yes. What's another one?
What about glossy?
Yes, very much so. Definitely. Another one?
Bumpy.
Yes, very good. I'm going to say slimy, slippery, and I will also say slick. Okay, Tanner, you want to go again?
Like, for lack of better words, I'd say like scratched.
Yeah, like sandpapery would be really good. Yeah, excellent, very good. Elizabeth.
Grainy.
Yeah, very good, excellent. Kylie.
Billowy. Would that be one that counted like light, like airy kind of?
Oh yeah, like when you use those painting drop cloths that are the really thin plastic, that kind of a thing where the wind just kind of picks it up.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I would think so. Excellent. One I'm thinking of is like barky, like bark from a tree. And there's so many different kinds of trees, lots of different kinds of bark. I'm thinking sandy would be another one. Something that I could, if I wanted to get a sandy texture on a piece of cardboard, I could put glue down, sprinkle sand on. When that dries, put some more glue down and sprinkle some more sand on. So a couple different textures there. Tanner, what are what's name 2 more textures?
Like doughy.
Oh, that's a good one.
And then I guess it's kind of the same, like gooey. I don't know. Those come to mind, but I think those are kind of similar.
Yeah, no, those are both good. Excellent. How about you, Elizabeth? Oh, Tanner, that reminds me of the Seattle gum wall.
Oh yeah.
Excellent. That's so gross. Did I tell you guys about watching the 2-year-old little boy pick a piece of gum off and eat it at the Seattle gum wall?
Oh, don't remind me.
Oh, that was so nasty. The skin on the back of my neck is just curdling right now. Elizabeth, what about you?
Spongy.
What's that?
Spongy.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Sponge.
Excellent. How about another one?
Glassy, maybe, like the texture of a glass.
Yeah, I think so. Those are both really good. Okay, Kylie, let's hear a couple from you.
Gnarly.
Excellent.
And another one's like papery. When something's kind
Yeah.
of brittle and thin, and you can just kind of tell.
I think that's really good because you could use like tissue paper, you could use writing paper, you could use a lot of different kinds of papers for that one. Yeah, excellent, very good. Okay, so just that took us less than 3.5 minutes, and we listed 25 different adjectives. So if you guys want to do this exercise with roommates or family members or whatever, go ahead and just write down all the, just stop yourself at 12. And just don't submit those first 6 right there up at the top. But yeah, excellent, very good. And these questions, what I'm noticing is that you guys are really doing an excellent job at referring to the text for the answers. And when things are incorrect, it's usually just because it was answered too quickly and then you moved on without realizing that it was wrong. And several people have fixed that in the comments or retaken the quiz, and that is perfect. Let's see, question number 5. This one I think does stump a couple people. If it's visual texture, is it what organ or what sensory organ in your body primarily experiences something that's visual?
Your eye.
Yes, excellent, very good. Sometimes people get that tripped up. Now, as you go through, there's like these two things. They're essentially the same idea, where light is coming into the room, but one is natural light, and one is synthetic light. And it's these two images feel very different, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and just articulate why they feel so different. And this, I think, these are really great because they look so much like a material that they're not. Like the leather jacket is ceramic, and the banana peel, which is incredibly naturalistic, is made out of that Fimo clay, the polymer clay that you bake in an oven. I think that those are absolutely fantastic. A friend of mine was in an exhibit that I had where we were challenging, where I set the exhibit up to challenge people's expectations. And he made a ceramic flip-flop, like anyone that you find at the side of a pool, but it was so realistic that when the curator came, the on-site curator came to clean up the exhibit, he almost dropped it because he thought it was a regular sponge rubber flip-flop, and it was made out of ceramic. I think that this question right here is a really good one to really think about as you move forward with your artistic critique career, as well as in the context of this quiz. The broader idea is the cultural and historical definitions of beauty. There is this conceit that every culture has that their standards for beauty are the standards that everybody should share. And I know all of us have come across that. I was listening to a woman. I really kind of admire her. She is from a little teeny tiny village in North Central Africa, and she is now a runway model working in New York. She lives very simply. Most of her money she sends back to her family, just because the standards of living are so vastly different, and a little money goes a long way. But she said, as a model, she lucked out with having the right kind of body that a lot of these companies are looking for to model their clothes. And when she goes, and she is at all these parties and all these events and all this kind of stuff, every time she goes back home, she's ostracized, or people really pity her because they tell her she needs to be eating. She's going to die of starvation. It's just horrible. And she's so ugly because she's so skinny. And she said it's just absolutely fascinating to her how, with just a couple thousand miles away from each other, the standards and expectations of beauty are so completely at odds with each other. I just thought that was fascinating. So think about that as you answer question 9. What are some of the standards of beauty? And I think, you know, we can talk about things like scarification versus makeup. We can talk about the different uses of makeup for men and women, for example. There are groups of people where makeup is primarily the purview of men still today. And you know, when we look at it from the lens of our own culture, that's kind of weird. Then look at this on question 10. These are different kinds of textures. Are they natural or are they made? And just ask yourself those kinds of questions. And a lot of that will be from the text as well. And then this is another one of those questions where the answer is not right or wrong. You just need to be able to articulate your newfound expertise in textures and balance and things like that to describe how that affects the meaning and relationship that you have to this artwork. Now, so that's what that quiz is about. With texture and light, this module, we're going to be dealing a lot with textures. Some of them are rather simple, but we're also dealing with the ideas of color. Now, all of you guys, I think the 3 of you are animators, painters, and photographers. Is that right? And graphic designers. Is that what all of you guys are?
I'm doing sculpting, but close.
Sculpting. Okay. But so Kylie has a lot of experience with physical texture, and I think Tanner and Elizabeth, you have a lot of experience with color. So use that expertise in that part of the assignment, and then the other part they may not be so familiar with. Really think about what the module covers, because then at the end of the term, what you're going to be doing is just going hog wild on what you've made, applying everything you can think of using texture and color. I kind of referred to it as the mighty Voltron sculpture, because it's going to be a combination of all the things that you've learned. You know, how does skin deal with this in the structure, and you're kind of exploring that with the paper mache. How can texture and color really alter the effects or the communication arenas of the sculpture that you're working with? We look at Anish Kapoor. A lot of his stuff looks like just the perfect Japanese robot stainless steel balloons. You know, very, very smooth. And there's, I can't remember his name. He was a Wall Street expert who really focused on sculpture, and he makes these huge stainless steel sculptures that look like balloon animals. Do you guys know the artist that I'm thinking of? He always wears like a really nice suit whenever he does
Jeff
any
Koons?
of his art things. Yeah, Jeff Koons, excellent. He is a really good example of how to use texture to kind of engage your audience in unexpected ways. Like he has this Play-Doh sculpture that is actually, I believe, cast aluminum, but it looks like a huge amount of Play-Doh stacked like 6 feet high. And he has this balloon rabbit sculpture that he does that is actually made out of stainless steel, but it looks like a gigantic balloon animal. And stuff like that, I think, is an awful lot of fun. But then you also get at the other end of that, Constantine Brancusi would polish things to within an inch of their life so that the natural stone or wood that he was using would really show off its grain and its visual texture. And you know, stuff like that is just amazing. Or Barbara Hepworth, look at her stuff and how she uses texture to kind of propel you into a completely different realm of experience because of her incredibly precise and delicate use of very specific texture in her work. And there's a lot of people like that do that. Now, one of the things that I really like is Elana Tsui. He is the gentleman from Ghana, I believe, who does these gigantic tapestries that are like 25 feet high and 50 feet long, but he makes them out of milk bottle caps or crushed beer cans that he'll fold up, he'll punch holes in it, and then loop them together with rings. And so he has this very grungy texture to begin with. But when he puts thousands and thousands and thousands of these together, the texture transforms entirely from a very grungy, stiff, folded metal to a powerful and almost delicately folding and waving material that reminds us of textiles. When it's not, I mean, it's not anything that anybody could ever use as a textile because it's all sharp edges and metal, but it begins looking like that because of what he does. There's another artist. Give me just a second. Let's see if I can find him really quick. He's another one of my favorite guys in art. Nick Cave. If you guys look at Nick Cave, he does these things called sound suits, which are basically costumes that he produces that he can move in or somebody else can move in. But they're costumes that are designed to get you to ask questions about your expectations of society and art and relationships of people. But what's so cool about it is that he uses texture and movement to get you to ask those questions without any propaganda, without providing any initial answer or an ending answer, but they're just a way to really use this energetic textures to engage the viewer and make you feel almost like you're personally involved in the creation of the artwork. So, you know, Nick Cave is absolutely astounding. All those people are. Kiki Smith is another one that I think is astounding. Her use of texture and color is a bit more graphic from the standpoint of graphic design. And I think her work is absolutely astounding. And there's a lot of artists that will do that. Of course, there's a friend of mine on LinkedIn. I can't even remember what his name is right now. His last name is Akpuk, and he is from West Central Africa, and he uses imagery, very simple images that look like language symbols. They're not, but they look like it, and they are designed directly from the visual history of his family's culture, you know, where he originates from. And what's fascinating about this is when you look at it from a ways away, you have you see differences of color, and as you come closer, the color resolves itself into these mysterious symbols, very stylized images, and sometimes just straight up graphic designs. And as you get closer, it develops into multiple layers of visual texture that are just really striking. Oh, his name is Victor Akpuk, and he's absolutely, you know, his stuff is really cool too. So be thinking about all that kind of stuff and continue with the excellent work that you're doing on the quizzes and stuff. And next week, we are going to be talking a little bit more about contemporary art, specifically the ideas of conceptual art as illustrated through a couple short exercises. And that one, you'll see that there are a number of different assignments all crowded together, but all the assignments are relatively short. And a lot of the energy you put into it will be thinking about what you're doing and then articulating what you think about what you're doing. And that is really what conceptual art is. All the other stuff that we're doing in this 3D class, we are using specific materials as our media, like foam, you're carving foam, wire, paper or cardboard, cloth or plastic. You know, these are the physical materials that are your medium for creating your 3D design, your artwork. Conceptual art, and you're using tools like pliers or the files to shape that medium. With conceptual art, the tools that you use to shape the medium, those tools are that kind of physical medium, you know, photography, foam, sticks, that kind of thing. But you're using them as tools because the medium that you're actually shaping in conceptual art is the person's thoughts directly. You're molding their imagination using the elements you create in the physical world as your tools to do that molding. So it's a little bit different layer, and it's not, I don't know if we can entirely call it 3D design, but we need to be aware of it because it's definitely not 2D, but it's multi-dimensional design. We're working with things like time and ideas to create an artwork that exists primarily inside of our observers' minds. So something to think about as we get closer to that. Do you guys have any questions as we wind this session up? Or do you guys have any ideas of what other people might have as questions?
I don't have any questions.
All right. If you don't have any questions yourselves, good. Yes, Kylie.
Sorry, I was just going to say a question I think would come up and probably would have come up for me if I were paying a little bit more attention. How long do we need to wait between coats before they're basically dry? How long before we can be like sure they're dry and sand them?
I would say put your hand on it, and if it still feels cold, let it dry more. You want to have this really good and dry before you start sanding. And if it feels cold to you and it isn't in a freezer or in front of the the air conditioning outlet, the reason it feels cold is because water is still dissipating. It's still evaporating. So I would, if that's the case, if it looks like it should be dry but it still feels cold, set it outside and let just the sun and the air do their trick and dry it out. But I think however long that is, what is interesting to me is as we've been doing this, sometimes Utah is famous for its moist air. Actually not, but sometimes it's been so dry there that people have put it into the studio space next to where you picked up your kids, and then they come back 6 hours later and it's ready for another coat. It has dried that fast before. Of course, if it's that dry out, a lot of people start getting nosebleeds too. But I would say generally overnight is going to be pretty good. And if you have a spot that you can leave it in your garage or even outside, so it's protected from the elements, but it still is exposed to the dry air, overnight it's going to be really good.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing. Can anybody think of a question that somebody might have who did not come today?
To correct a quiz, do you want us to retake it or just put in the comment section our correct answer?
Tanner, that is an excellent question. I think either way is totally fine, whatever you want to do. I think a lot of the times it's easier just to put it in the comment section. But what I'm finding is that Canvas does not tell me when somebody puts something like that in the comments. So I would, when you do that, I think all three of you have done this already, but when you do that, make a change in the comments or add something to it, just drop me an email and let me know so I can go back and put the extra points in. Okay, so people have done that. The problem is if you have a 56-point quiz and you miss 1 point, you're going to have to retake the entire thing or just put it into the comment. I think it's easier just to put it in the comment and email me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I hope you guys have an absolutely wonderful week. I look forward to visiting with all of you next Tuesday. It was really exciting that we had so many people and so many of these already. I think we've had 6 and 7 people in every other one, so or more. So I'm hoping that next week we'll have more people as well. But do you guys find that it's easier to understand what's going on when you are part of the Teams call?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. And I really appreciate it because you guys ask me the questions that I really need to know so that I can make it more reasonable and better for you guys as a whole. So thank you so much. All right, folks, I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I will talk to you next Tuesday. Stay out of trouble and stay healthy, please. All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
I
you.
will talk to you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.